My name is Rachel. I was 27 when my mom smiled at me over the phone and said, "You'll be moving out soon anyway." I laughed until I came home from my prenatal checkup and saw what she meant. It didn't hit all at once. The front door was unlocked, which was odd. I had left in a rush that morning, yes, but I always checked it, always. Inside, the air smelled like sawdust and plastic wrap. I walked into the kitchen and froze. The solid oak cabinets, hand sanded and sealed by me last winter, were gone. Replaced with glossy ivory ones, still wearing factory film. A new island stood where my breakfast nook used to be. The butcher block counter I'd installed was missing. The tile I had laid with shaking wrists, 6 months pregnant and nauseous, had been ripped out. In its place, marble. Expensive, cold. No one had told me a thing. I stood in silence, one hand resting on my belly. My daughter kicked softly, as if to say, "Do you see this too?" I called my mom. She picked up on the first ring, chipper as ever. "Hey, sweetie, everything okay?" "The kitchen," I said. "What happened to the kitchen?" "Oh," her voice went up a register. "Isn't it stunning? Caroline helped pick it all out." Caroline, my brother Jason's fiancée, she had barely been to the house twice. I sat down at the edge of the living room rug, breath catching. Why is she choosing things for this house? Well, my mom's tone slid into something rehearsed. Jason and Caroline are going to need the space. It just made sense to start planning ahead. But I live here, I said. I've been paying the property taxes, the maintenance, the repairs, everything. Honey, she said gently, you've never been one to settle. You're always chasing something. You said yourself this was temporary. I hadn't, not once, but she didn't stop. Besides, this house has always been about family. I looked around at the baby gear in the hallway, the formula samples by the door, the whiteboard calendar where I tracked OB appointments. My hand was still shaking when I ended the call. Not angrily, just hollow. Outside, a contractor in a hard hat waved to me through the kitchen window. I didn't wave back. That night, I climbed into the attic to find an old lamp that helped with my backaches. Instead, I found a binder under a pile of moving blankets. Cream-colored, labeled in black marker. Phase plan, J+E home. Inside were notes in my mom's handwriting. Sketches. Contractor names, deadlines. Install cabinets by 7/14. Ask Caroline about fixture finish. Jason prefers gas stove. My name didn't appear once. I flipped the final page. Tucked in the back was a printed invoice. Full kitchen remodel, down payment received, timeline 45 days. The date was 6 months ago. I had still been working overtime to afford prenatal vitamins and emergency plumbing repairs. The roof had been leaking that week. My mother had thanked me, told me I was the reason the family house still felt alive. She had already signed the contract. I sat in the attic until it grew too dark to see. When I came back down, the brochure was waiting on the hallway table. A glossy mock-up of a modern starter home for growing families. On the cover, a couple smiling in front of a newly renovated house. Mine. There was a sticky note attached, one I hadn't noticed before. Don't forget to pick up your mail. That wasn't a reminder, it was a hint. Something was happening behind my back. Carefully, methodically, and I had missed it. Or refused to believe it, until now. By morning, the brochure was gone from the hallway table. I hadn't moved it. At first, I thought maybe I'd imagined the sticky note. Pregnancy brain, stress. I even looked through the trash, careful not to disturb the full bag in case I needed to dig deeper. It wasn't there either. That scared me more than finding it. Someone had been inside the house after I went to bed. I walked the room slowly, barefoot on the hardwood floors I had refinished last fall. The nursery door was cracked open, empty, still waiting on the crib I'd ordered from a secondhand shop in Albany. The box of donated baby clothes I'd washed and folded with shaky hands was untouched, but the little ceramic bear lamp, my first baby item, was missing from the side table. I found it in the kitchen. Moved, not stolen, just shifted. As if someone had held it, turned it, set it down elsewhere without thinking. Or on purpose. I walked straight to the dining room credenza where I kept the house files. The left drawer, my drawer, was slightly ajar. It never stayed that way. The old latch always clicked into place. I pulled it open. The folder marked house still sat neatly inside. Tax receipts, utility records, my handwritten notes on repair schedules. Everything I'd touched, fixed, arranged, I flipped through it in fast, sharp motions. A new envelope had been tucked in the back. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Mom's soft, looping cursive. Inside, a checklist. Clear guest room closet. Move Rachel's documents to labeled bin. Schedule walkthrough before 7:10. It didn't say whose walkthrough, but the guest room was mine. The closet was where I kept my winter coats and hospital bag. The documents were mine. I backed away from the drawer like it had hissed. This wasn't just about a remodel. This wasn't about helping Jason settle down. This was a timeline, a project, and I was the demolition phase. I grabbed the folder and shoved it into my tote. My coat, shoes, keys, I was out the door before I realized I hadn't eaten. At the end of the driveway, I stopped short. A dark SUV was parked across the street, not one I recognized, engine off. Windows tinted, it didn't move. I walked past it slowly. The driver was slouched, head turned, maybe asleep, maybe watching. At the end of the block, I ducked into Millie's Cafe, the only place open before 8 a.m. besides the gas station. The bell jingled as I stepped in, and Millie herself looked up from behind the counter. "Hey, sweetheart, you okay? You look like you saw a ghost." Something like that. She poured me a cup before I even asked. I sat near the back, folder on my lap. My hands trembled as I flipped through more pages. One line was highlighted in pink. Transfer of occupancy target, 3rd week of July. That was 2.5 weeks away. I felt my breath catch. My due date was mid-August. She knew. She had timed it. I pressed a napkin to my mouth to keep from making a sound. A couple at the front laughed over breakfast sandwiches. Behind the counter, Millie wiped her hands and checked the clock. I wasn't safe in that house anymore. Not in the way that word used to mean. Not physically unsafe, yet, but emotionally, psychologically, legally, I didn't even know what I was standing on anymore. I left the cafe with 2 muffins I didn't want. The SUV was gone when I got back. Inside, I scanned the house with new eyes. The guest room closet? Already empty. The linen shelf? Cleared of my towels. My boots were missing from the entryway rack. I opened the fridge. The note I'd written, "Do not toss prenatal supplements," was gone. In its place, a magnet for a moving company I'd never called. That night, I didn't sleep. I drafted a list. Not of suspicions, of facts, my bank transfers, repair bills, proof that I had been more than a tenant, more than a placeholder, more than a problem to remove. The county clerk's office was a squat brick building behind a shuttered pharmacy and a vape shop that had been coming soon for 3 years. I parked crooked, barely noticed, and walked inside with my tote pressed tight to my side. The man behind the desk wore wireframe glasses and a name tag that said Donald. He smiled, but it was automatic. When I asked to pull up property ownership records for my family's address, his hand paused over the keyboard. "I can look that up for you," he said slowly. "May I ask what this is regarding?" "It's my house," I said. At least I thought it was. Donald nodded once, typed something in, then tilted the monitor slightly away from view. His eyes scanned the screen for a beat too long. "Is something wrong?" I asked. He didn't answer at first. Then he reached under the desk, rifled through a stack of folders, and pulled out one stamped with the county seal. "I can print you the current file," he said, avoiding my gaze. "It's public record." The pages came out warm from the printer. I didn't wait to get back to the car. I dropped into the stiff lobby chair and flipped through them right there. I saw my parents' names first, then the property deed, then Jason and Caroline. The names were written in clean, crisp print, a pending transfer line highlighted. Effective July 21st, 2 weeks from now. I don't remember walking out. I remember Donald calling after me, something polite and rehearsed, but my ears were ringing. The sky outside had darkened while I was inside, clouds gathering in low, mean shapes over the parking lot. In the car, I texted my mom. "Can you call me?" She responded 4 minutes later. "Busy right now? Everything okay?" I didn't reply. Instead, I drove, aimless. Streets I'd driven 100 times blurred past. Gas stations, dry cleaners, the high school I used to walk past barefoot in the summers just to feel rebellious. When I pulled into the hardware store lot, I didn't know why I'd come. Then I remembered. Last winter, I bought insulation here, and caulk, and paint for the nursery. The man who'd helped me then, Marcus, recognized me the moment I stepped inside. "Hey, Rachel," he said. "Need more touch-up?" I stared at him for a second, then shook my head. "No, just..." Needed a minute. He gestured toward the break room near the back. "You want some water? Sit down." I nodded, followed him. Grateful. The moment I was alone, I pulled out the file again. In one corner, a note in fine print. "All communications regarding transition to be directed to secondary applicant. Caroline, She wasn't even married in yet, and she was listed ahead of me. The betrayal wasn't just sharp, it was surgical. Back in the car, I rested my forehead on the steering wheel. My phone buzzed, a message from Jason. Hey, heard you might have stopped by the clerk's office. Everything okay? I didn't answer. I drove home with my hazard lights on, even though there was no traffic. The gesture felt appropriate. When I stepped inside, a large box sat by the front door, labeled Rachel Miske. Inside, my sewing kit, my cookbooks, baby shower invites I'd tucked away in a drawer weeks ago. I checked the nursery. My rocking chair was gone. That night, I didn't cry. I made copies, every file, every receipt, every photo. I started a second list, names, dates, conversations I remembered. The things that had felt off in the moment, but I had brushed aside. Because this wasn't a mistake. This was a strategy. The contractor's office was 20 minutes outside town, tucked between a tool rental warehouse and a taxidermy supply shop that hadn't seen customers since Clinton was president. I almost turned back twice, but I needed answers. Inside, the walls were lined with sample swatches and countertop slabs. A young receptionist in a sweatshirt looked up and offered a clipboard without asking why I was there. I'm not here for a quote, I said. I'm here because your team ripped out my kitchen last week without notice. She blinked. You'll want Ron. Ron was the foreman. He came out from the back after a few minutes. Big guy, work belt still clipped around his waist. The moment he saw me, his face did something strange. Tightened and softened at the same time. You're Rachel. Yes, I said, jaw clenched. And I'd like to know why no one told me my own house was being gutted. He hesitated. We had the work order, signed off by the primary contact. Who was that? Caroline Hartman, my brother's fiancée. Ron turned, shuffled through a drawer, and handed me a printed work order. Top line, Hartman Project, Transitional Renovation. Start date, June 10th. Scope, full kitchen overhaul, appliance update, minor structural support. Payment, partial received. Client, Jason H/Caroline H. Who paid the deposit? He checked the file. Split, half from a Hartman Trust account, half from a check signed by Diane D. My mother. My stomach twisted. Did anyone confirm who actually lived there? Ron scratched the back of his neck. Look, ma'am, I don't want to get in the middle of anything. We go where the paperwork tells us. I nodded. So if I told you I've been living in that house for 2 years, paying every utility bill and tax, overseeing every repair? He held up a hand, awkward and apologetic. I'm just the contractor, but if it helps, the guys didn't understand why everything was in such good shape. Usually we're cleaning up after years of neglect, but that place felt lived in, maintained. It was, by me. I left the office with the paperwork clutched in my tote. In the parking lot, I sat in the car and stared out through the windshield. Across the street, a dad in a camo hoodie helped his daughter climb out of a truck. She dropped her juice box. He didn't yell, just picked it up, smiled, handed it back. I pressed my hand to my belly. My daughter kicked once, strong. She was the reason I hadn't walked away yet. But now I wasn't sure what I was staying for. Back home, I found a voicemail from Jason. Hey, heard you've been asking around. Listen, let's not make this dramatic, okay? I know Mom didn't handle everything perfectly, but this isn't about kicking you out. We just didn't think you'd be there much longer. My throat tightened. I didn't remember ever telling him that. I hadn't told anyone that. And then I realized he hadn't said your house. He'd said there, like I was already gone. I walked through the kitchen. The cabinets no longer smelled like sawdust, just lemon cleaner and glue. I opened one, empty. No glasses, no mugs. Mine had all been boxed. I opened the fridge. The magnet from the moving company had been replaced with a recipe card. Chicken piccata, Caroline's favorite. Every surface, every corner had been wiped of me. That night, I made copies of Ron's paperwork. I added them to the growing file. Then I started calling numbers I never thought I'd call. Title advisors, property tax assessors, and an attorney who once helped a friend with a boundary dispute. Because if they wanted to treat me like I didn't exist, they'd better hope I stayed quiet. I hadn't planned to check Jason's laptop. It was sitting open on the dining table when I got home. Our old dining table, the one with the wobble I fixed the winter the heat went out. Jason had stopped by to grab a few things while I was at a prenatal yoga class, which Mom had suggested I take to relax. What she didn't mention was that Jason had a key. He was already gone, left a sticky note that said, "Thought you'd want your candle from the windowsill, took it for safekeeping." That candle had been my mother's once. She gave it to me when I moved in, sandalwood and clove. I hadn't even noticed it was gone. But the laptop, it was still warm. I sat, hands hovering. I didn't mean to look, I meant to close it. Then it lit up, message preview. Mom, let's finalize the Sunday transfer call. I tapped the space bar. The screen blinked on. No password. The chat app was still open. A group thread titled Family Plans, Summer Reset. I clicked. At the top was a message from Caroline. Caroline, just confirmed the nursery paint went with the pale sage. Hope that's okay. Then Jason, looks great. Once we're in, I'll swap the fixtures. Rachel left all the receipts in the drawer. Then Mom, let's please avoid drama next week. She's hormonal and unpredictable. It's just logistics now. The room tilted. My ears rang. There were dozens of messages. Photos of swatches, fixture options, mood boards. My childhood bedroom had already been assigned. Guest yoga space, per Caroline. My closet in the guest room was being measured for a new shelving system. There was even a chart labeled Timeline, Rachel Transition, with a checkmark beside Kitchen Complete, Closet Cleared, and Legal Prep in Progress. I scrolled until the thread began. The first message was dated 8 months ago. Let's move forward with the house transfer plan. Jason and C need stability. Rachel won't stay long after the baby. No one argued. No one questioned. I closed the laptop with shaking hands. Outside, the sun was setting, slicing gold across the porch. The new porch light, installed by me, flickered twice. Probably wired wrong, another thing no one noticed until I fixed it. I sat on the porch steps, same ones I painted last fall, and stared into the yard. The hydrangeas had started blooming again. I'd pruned them too early in the spring, scared I'd ruin them. But they came back anyway, so would I. The next morning, I woke up at 5 a.m. and printed the entire message thread. Then I backed it up, twice. I emailed a copy to my lawyer. I made coffee without tasting it and packed a duffel bag with essentials. Documents, prenatal records, copies of receipts, a folder labeled Primary Residency Evidence. As I zipped it closed, I noticed something. A baby onesie tucked under the edge of the dresser. It read, Mommy's Little Anchor. I didn't remember buying it. I placed it gently in the center of the bag. Because I knew now I wasn't an anchor to them, I was baggage. They'd tried to lift me out of their picture so gently, they thought I wouldn't even notice I was gone. But I had proof, and I had time, not much, but enough. His office was on the second floor of a converted Victorian across from the courthouse. Gold-lettered window, fake ficus in the corner, a desk just too polished to feel honest. I was 15 minutes early. I wanted him off balance. The receptionist barely glanced up. You're here to see Mr. Halperin? I nodded. Rachel Donovan? She froze. Her mouth opened slightly, like she recognized the name. Then, just as quickly, looked back at her screen. Go right in, he's expecting you. He was seated behind his desk, tie askew, sleeves rolled. Late 40s, maybe 50, expensive haircut. He stood as I entered and extended a hand. Rachel, he said warmly. Nice to finally meet in person. Finally, I didn't shake. I sat. I want to know exactly what authority you've been given regarding the house on Ashburn Street. He blinked, taken aback, but only slightly. Then he pulled a folder from the stack behind him, flipped it open like he'd practiced. Your mother granted me limited power of attorney regarding real estate matters tied to the property. When? 7 months ago? I exhaled through my nose. And you didn't think to notify the person living there? You weren't listed as a legal resident, he said quickly, as if he'd said it before. I'm sorry, but my obligation is to my client. I leaned forward. You're sure about that? Because I have years of tax statements, maintenance bills, and correspondence all addressed to me. I've been managing that home top to bottom. You're telling me none of that matters? He hesitated. It complicates things. I pulled out a folder from my bag, laid it on his desk. Here's the county file showing my payments. Here's the contractor invoice with a deposit paid by someone other than the titled owner. And here, I slid the group chat printouts across the table, is a record of coordination between your clients and 2 unauthorized third parties to remove me from the property without due notice. He didn't reach for the pages, but he looked, really looked. I'm not asking for a fight, I said, but I won't be bulldozed out of my daughter's home. His eyebrows lifted slightly. Daughter, I sat back, let the silence stretch. Finally, he cleared his throat. There are procedural options, arbitration, mediation, but you should understand the transfer is already in progress. I know, I've seen the filing. Then you know your time is limited. I stood, so is yours. As I walked out, the receptionist avoided my eyes. Downstairs, the courthouse bells began to chime. Noon. A reminder, maybe, that time wasn't on my side, that someone, somewhere, believed I could be moved like furniture. But I wasn't furniture. I was the foundation. Back in my car, I opened the glove box and pulled out the envelope I hadn't dared touch for days. A letter from my OB/GYN, confirming not only my due date, but a high-risk complication that meant I couldn't be under extreme stress or instability. Too late for that now. I pressed the envelope flat on the dashboard, took a photo, emailed it to my lawyer with one sentence. They knew. Then I started the engine. Because now I had more than proof. I had medical grounds. The front door creaked when I pushed it open, just slightly ajar like someone had left in a hurry. The house was silent, heavy. Even the floorboards seemed to hold their breath. My boots clicked on the hardwood. I called out once, just in case. No response. Then I stepped into the nursery. The crib was gone, not disassembled. Gone. The mobile, the mattress, the drawer where I'd folded little onesies. Gone. I stood frozen in the doorway. Something cold slid down my spine. I had installed that crib myself. Screwed each bolt by hand, careful not to over-tighten. Painted the frame soft cream to match the mural I stenciled above it. 3 clouds and a little paper moon. Now the wall looked empty. Too empty. In its place sat a folded changing table I didn't recognize. The style was modern. White lacquer, glass handles, not mine. A tiny price tag dangled from the corner. I backed out slowly, into the hallway, and opened the linen closet. My towels were missing. The hallway photo frames, pictures from the baby shower, ultrasound printouts, even a faded Polaroid of me and my mom from high school, all replaced. In their place, generic prints of sailboats and dried flowers. I moved like I was underwater, heavy and slow, trying to breathe through rising panic. In the guest room, my suitcase had been zipped and placed neatly by the wall. A note taped to the handle read, "Rachel, prepped for Sunday pickup." Pickup, like I was a service. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands. Opened the security app I'd installed after the locks changed. A notification blinked. New device connected. Jason's iPhone, 11:06 a.m. Today, while I was at the attorney's office. I clicked the footage. Watched Jason walk through the front door with 2 movers behind him. Heard muffled voices. One of them saying, "Just grab the white set. Caroline wants to stage it." Stage it? For what? I turned off the phone and sank into the hall chair, one of the only pieces of furniture left untouched. I remembered sanding that chair in the backyard, stomach round, sawdust sticking to my sweatshirt. I had made this house into something whole. Now it was being hollowed out around me. I reached for my phone again, dialed my mom. Voicemail. I tried Jason. Straight to voicemail. Then, just as I was about to put it down, my phone buzzed. A text from Caroline. "Hey Rachel, we just grabbed a few things to keep safe during the transition. Hope that's okay. Let us know if you need help packing." Help packing, as if this was a weekend trip. I stood, walked to the back porch, looked out at the garden beds I'd built last spring, one brick at a time. The lavender had bloomed again, the rosemary too. I had planted them for my daughter. I wanted her first smells of the world to be something soft, something safe. I pressed both palms to my belly. "I'm still here," I whispered. That night I called my lawyer and told her everything. The footage, the removal, the text, I sent it all. And then, in the middle of that call, I saw headlights sweep across the wall outside. A car, pulling into my driveway. I stood completely still, not afraid, not anymore. The knock came 3 minutes after the headlights. Firm, measured, not the knock of someone nervous or welcome. I opened the door just wide enough to see a woman in her late 30s, tan slacks, blue blazer, hair tied back in a slick bun. She held a clipboard in one hand, a small camera hanging from her neck. "Hi there," she said brightly. "Rachel, right? I'm Vanessa. I'm here to do the pre-staging walkthrough." The words didn't register at first. "The what?" She smiled wider, oblivious. "Just a routine interior capture before the final turnover. Jason said you might be resting, but I wouldn't be long." I stepped fully into the doorway. "Turnover of what, exactly?" She blinked, confused. "The house? The Hartman residence? Your brother and his fiancée?" "This is my house." Now her smile faltered. Well, I have a work order right here. The property is slated for listing in August. This is part of the prep cycle. Photo documentation, layout mapping. No one authorized that, I said flatly. She hesitated. Jason signed. Jason doesn't live here, and until the legal transfer is finalized, no one steps inside. I watched her recalibrate. She glanced toward her car, where a man in a windbreaker sat in the passenger seat, watching. I don't want to be difficult, she said, softer now. But if the property is in transition, it's not in transition, I said. It's in dispute. She stiffened. Okay, then I'll make a note to flag the listing. But just so you know, I'm contracted independently. If you're not the point of contact, I stepped forward. I'm the one with my name on the utility bills, the tax filings, the repair invoices. I'm the one who's lived here, paid for everything, and carried a pregnancy through foundation leaks and kitchen dust. So, unless you have a court order stapled to that clipboard, you can turn around. Vanessa nodded once, tightly. Understood. She walked back to her car without another word. The man in the passenger seat rolled down his window as she approached. I didn't hear what he said. I didn't care. I watched them drive off, then I closed the door and locked it, every bolt. Back in the kitchen, I sat down at the empty island, the one I hadn't picked, hadn't wanted, and opened my laptop. My lawyer had sent an update. She'd spoken to someone in the DA's office. They were willing to review the timeline under tenant protection law. Because here's what they hadn't counted on. They thought I'd walk out quietly, too tired to fight, too pregnant to matter. But now, I had more than documentation. I had proof of physical intimidation, premature removal of personal property, unauthorized entries. And I had video. I sent the footage of Vanessa's visit to my lawyer with one line. They tried to stage my daughter's room like I was never here. Then I got up, walked to the nursery, stared at the blank wall where the crib had been, and picked up a brush. The mural was faded now. Some of the lines had chipped. I dipped the brush in pale blue and began touching up the edges. Because they might have cleared the room, but they couldn't erase what I had built. Not without going through me first. The call came just after 8 a.m., while I was scrubbing paint off my hands from the night before. My lawyer's voice was tight, too professional, too precise. Rachel, the DA's office filed an emergency motion. Judge Callahan's agreed to a preliminary hearing tomorrow morning. My heart stuttered. What kind of hearing? A tenant residency dispute with injury risk due to pregnancy. We're pushing to freeze the transfer before the third-party listing process can advance. I wiped my hands on a towel, still damp with lavender cleaner. They tried to sell it before the paperwork was even done. I know, that's why we're moving fast. Outside the window, the neighborhood was just waking up. A dog barked. A kid on a bike skidded past the driveway. My house, my home, looked still, normal. But inside, every part of it was a landmine. I need everything you have printed and organized, she continued. Proof of residency, documentation of expenses, medical records, correspondence, photos, screenshots. If it's in your head, get it on paper. I already started, I said. I'll have it all. She paused. They may bring Jason. I froze. As what? A witness? More likely a party with contested claim. If they're bold, maybe even as co-owner in waiting. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I said, good, I want them all there. The call ended. I stood in the kitchen, mine, for 3 full minutes without moving. Then I went to work. I printed every dated receipt, every email confirmation, every invoice from the contractor Ron. I labeled folders with tabs, repairs, medical risk, residency evidence, unauthorized access. When I opened the nursery folder, I paused. Inside was a photo I'd forgotten I took. Me kneeling beside the crib, belly just starting to show. I was holding a wrench, smiling tiredly, paint smudged on my cheek. I placed the photo on top. By afternoon, the entire dining table was covered. I ate crackers and hummus over my laptop. I sent my lawyer scanned copies, double-checked timestamps, redacted personal details where needed. Then I went out back. The garden was quiet. I knelt and trimmed the rosemary, snipped a few lavender stems. I tied them with twine and set them by the front door. Not for show, for grounding. Because tomorrow I would walk into a courtroom where my own family might argue that I was a squatter in the home I'd built with my bare hands. Tomorrow my name would be entered into a record where truth was measured in pages and timelines and clean print. And I would not flinch. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the nursery and listened to the quiet tick of the old wall clock. My daughter kicked twice, then went still. At 3:17 a.m., I stood and whispered, "They're going to hear me." Because they thought I would fold. They thought I would soften. They thought I would walk away. But they forgot. I am my mother's daughter, just not the kind of mother she turned out to be. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Just 2 rows of benches, faded flags, and a judge's bench elevated like a quiet mountain. The kind of place where verdicts didn't echo, they settled. I sat beside my lawyer at the petitioner's table, folders neatly arranged, hands folded tight in my lap. Across the aisle, Jason sat with Caroline behind him. He didn't meet my eyes. Caroline did, and smiled, small, confident. Judge Callahan entered, robed, stern, no nonsense. He glanced at the paperwork, adjusted his glasses, and began. "We are here regarding temporary injunction on property transfer for 441 Ashburn Street. Claimant Rachel Donovan has filed motion asserting primary residency and contributory ownership." He looked at me. "Miss Donovan, you understand the stakes?" I nodded once. "Yes, Your Honor." "Good, let's proceed." My lawyer rose, spoke clearly, cited dates, exhibits, photos. She handed up copies of receipts, tax records, utility bills, all in my name. Then she mentioned the pregnancy, the timeline of removals, the high-risk designation. Judge Callahan flipped through the documents slowly. His expression didn't change. Then he turned to Jason. "Mr. Hartman, your response?" Jason stood, cleared his throat. "My mother owns the property. She designated me a successor. Rachel was staying temporarily. We assumed she'd relocate after the baby." "Assumed?" the judge said. Jason hesitated. "Yes, I mean, she never said she was staying permanently." "Did she say she was leaving?" Jason paused again. "Not explicitly." My lawyer stood. "Your Honor, may we ask Mr. Hartman how often he visited the home during the past year?" Callahan nodded. "Proceed." She faced Jason. "In the past 12 months, how many times did you physically visit 441 Ashburn Street?" Jason shifted. "Maybe 5 times? 6? Did you contribute to repairs, maintenance, utilities?" "No, but did you have a key?" "No, I only got one last month." My lawyer handed a photo to the court clerk. "This was the nursery on June 3rd, painted by Rachel Donovan, decorated, assembled." "Jason, did you assist with this room?" Jason looked at the photo, then back up. "No, that was all. Rebecca did it." Silence. My lawyer didn't flinch. "I'm sorry, who?" Jason blinked. "I meant Rachel. Rachel did it." But the damage was done. Callahan raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Hartman, do you typically confuse your sister's name with someone else's?" "No, I'm nervous." "Clearly." Behind Jason, Caroline whispered something under her breath, but the bailiff gave her a look and she went silent. Judge Callahan made a note on the file, then looked at me. "Miss Donovan, do you have anything to say?" I stood, hands at my sides. "Your Honor, I lived in that house alone for over 2 years. I paid for every repair, every bill. I built a life inside those walls, and I'm weeks from delivering a child in that space. They knew that. They planned around it, not with me, but around me." I looked directly at Jason, and now they're trying to erase that effort with staged furniture and signed work orders. But I was there, every day. That house wasn't just bricks and beams, it was my stability, my daughter's safety, and their silence was not a mistake. It was a strategy. Callahan nodded. "Thank you, Miss Donovan." He turned back to Jason. "Anything else?" Jason shook his head. "Quiet now." The judge looked down at the file again. Then, softly, "We'll reconvene Friday for ruling." The gavel struck once. Outside, the courthouse air felt too sharp. My lungs burned with every breath. But as I walked down the steps, I realized he didn't just get my name wrong. He revealed how little they saw me. I was halfway through a plain bagel at Millie's Cafe when the call came. Private number. I stared at the screen for a moment before answering. "Hello?" Her voice hit like a brick through glass. "Rachel." "It's me." I hadn't heard her voice in weeks. Not since the house had started emptying itself without warning. Not since I became a name on a document she pretended didn't exist. "Mom," she exhaled. "Look, I didn't call to argue. I want to settle this." I stared out the window. Rain tapped gently against the glass. "Settle what?" "You know what." Her voice was different, soft, measured, like someone trying to control a spill before it stains. "I watched part of the hearing online," she said. "You were very composed." "Jason wasn't," I replied. Silence. Then, Look, things got away from us. I never meant for it to go this far. Caroline got ahead of herself. Jason just wanted to help. Help who? She didn't answer. I have documentation, Mom, video, proof of entry without consent, unauthorized removals, and you gave someone else access to my house. I thought you wouldn't stay after the baby, she said. You never said you'd stay. I never said I'd disappear either. There was a pause, then she shifted tone. If we drop the formal transfer, would you consider signing a short-term lease? 6 months? That gives you time to relocate somewhere calmer. I blinked. Calmer? I just mean maybe a condo, near the hospital, no stairs, no maintenance. It might be safer. Safer for who? She was reframing the theft of a home as concern. You planned this with them, I said. Did you ever even consider telling me? I thought it would stress you out. It did, just after the fact. Rachel, come on, we can figure this out, but I don't want lawyers getting more involved. This doesn't have to go public. There it was, not concern, fear. They weren't scared I'd be hurt. They were scared they'd look bad. You're worried people will know, I said, that they'll see what you did. I'm trying to protect our family's reputation. I laughed. I'm not the one who ruined it. Another silence. This one longer, then quiet. I'll call Jason. We'll talk. I'll tell him to slow things down. Don't bother. Rachel, you made your choice, I said. Now I'm making mine. I hung up. The bagel sat half-eaten on the table. Millie passed by and refilled my coffee without a word. She didn't need to ask. She'd seen the look on my face. Back at home, I opened the living room closet. Inside was the last box I hadn't unpacked. Baby bottles, unused. Diapers, sealed. A music box shaped like a moon that played a lullaby I hadn't dared listen to since the night I found the closet cleared. I turned the key once. Let it play. Soft notes drifted into the hallway. This wasn't about comfort anymore. This was about boundaries, about truth. I no longer needed them to give me anything. I needed the world to see what they tried to take. The clerk at the civil division counter didn't ask questions. Just pointed to a stack of yellow forms, said, "You'll need to fill out these 3, sign the bottom. Make sure to attach exhibits if you've got them." I did. 43 pages of them. Photos, scans, receipts, prenatal medical records, contractor statements, time-stamped text messages, a printed frame from the security footage of Jason unlocking my door without notice. A line from Caroline's text about staging the nursery early. I handed the stack over without shaking. The clerk leafed through them, then slid me a time-stamped receipt. "Judge will review it within 72 hours, he said. "But if the situation's urgent, you can request a temporary restraining order." "It is." He looked up, met my eyes. I didn't flinch. Back outside, the sidewalk buzzed with lunch traffic. Attorneys, students, city workers. None of them knew what I'd just done. None of them knew I'd just filed a temporary injunction halting the transfer of a house I had bled, bent, and built myself into. But I knew, and so would they. The courthouse steps felt shorter on the way down. That afternoon, I stopped by the hardware store one last time. Marcus was behind the register again. His eyes widened when he saw me. "You okay?" he asked gently. I nodded. "Getting there." I picked up a new deadbolt set. Brass finish, stronger than the last one. When I got home, I installed it myself. No music, no gloves, just the sound of metal on wood and the rhythm of someone taking back what's hers. I didn't tell anyone what I'd done. Not yet. Let them talk circles. Let them trade panicked calls, message each other about delays and lawyers and who tipped me off. They wanted quiet compliance. I gave them documentation. They wanted exit. I gave them resistance. At 7:42 p.m., my phone rang again. This time it was Jason. I let it ring. Then, voicemail. He sounded tense. "Rach, got word from the clerk. What are you doing? You don't have to take it this far. Look, I know we got ahead of things, but there's still time to fix this. Just call me back." He didn't even say my name wrong this time, because now I had it in writing, and it wasn't up to him anymore. That night, I sat by the front window, lights off, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one. My hand rested on my belly. My daughter kicked once, then again. Strong, assured. "You felt that too?" I whispered. She didn't need to answer. I was no longer asking for space. I was declaring it. Let them scramble. Let them call it revenge, spite, whatever soothed their ego. I called it motherhood, and I was just getting started. It was 10:18 a.m. on a Thursday when I heard the tires on gravel. Not a delivery truck, not the mail. Two cars, one silver, one white, parked at an angle like they didn't expect to stay long. I stood behind the curtain and watched them get out. Jason first, then Caroline, both in jeans and sunglasses, arms loaded with flattened cardboard boxes. Caroline's hair was in a ponytail, not the usual polished waves. Jason wore a hoodie I'd seen in high school photos. They weren't dressed for confrontation, they were dressed for moving. I opened the door before they could knock. Jason stopped short. Hey, he said like this was normal, like we were still siblings on speaking terms. Caroline stayed 2 steps behind him, arms crossed tight over the boxes. We're just here to get a few of our things, he added. Mom said she thought it'd be best if… There's a legal freeze on the property, I said. Filed yesterday. Effective immediately, you were notified. Jason shifted. Yeah, but technically, there's no technically left. Caroline stepped forward. We don't want to fight, we just want the things we already paid for. I didn't move from the doorway. Name one, she blinked. The rug in the nursery, the ottoman, the mirror in the entry hall, all of which were purchased by me, with receipts. You can ask the judge if you need confirmation. Jason rubbed the back of his neck. Look, this doesn't have to be dramatic. You made it dramatic when you signed staging contracts while I was still living here. You made it dramatic when you changed locks without notice. You made it dramatic when you cleared my daughter's crib out of the nursery like I didn't exist. His jaw flexed. We thought you'd left. You didn't check. Silence hung heavy. Then Caroline stepped forward again. Quieter now. We can't stay with Mom. She's freaking out. The realtor's pulling out. We're stuck. I looked at her, not cruel, not smug, just done. I didn't do that, I said. You did, when you decided to take something that wasn't yours and call it a gift. Jason looked away. The weight of what they'd lost was just starting to settle on them. I could feel it, that shift, the moment when people stop defending themselves and start realizing they're standing on sand. Please, Caroline said. Just let us take a few boxes we left in the garage. You mean the ones marked Master Closet, labeled in permanent marker a week before the court hearing? She swallowed hard. I folded my arm. Not today, not ever, not until a judge tells me otherwise. Jason opened his mouth, then closed it again. He nodded once. A small, slow motion of someone realizing they're not in charge anymore. They left without another word. I watched the cars reverse out of the drive, bump over the curb, and vanish around the corner. I didn't slam the door, I didn't cry, I just turned the new bolt, and this time it clicked solid. Because I wasn't holding ground anymore. I owned it. It wasn't a letter this time. It was a voicemail from my mother. She left it just after midnight, the night Jason and Caroline showed up with their boxes. Her voice cracked halfway through the message, and she never called back. I thought I was protecting you, she said. You were never supposed to find out. I sat alone in the nursery listening to her voice on loop. The mural was dry now. I'd finished the edges. The clouds were cleaner, the moon darker. I'd redrawn the stars. I knew what she meant. The transfer had been planned before I even moved in. Buried in a clause from years ago, one I'd signed blindly as part of emergency paperwork when Dad was in the hospital. I thought I was helping manage things. All I'd done was give her the keys to undo me slowly, and she'd done it with a smile. When I called her that morning, I didn't yell, I didn't beg. I just said, meet me at the notary's office, bring the documents. She arrived in a beige sweater and too much perfume. Looked like she hadn't slept. We sat across from each other, 2 pens between us. The notary nodded once and left the room to give us a moment. She picked up a pen, then paused. You really won't let this go? I'm not signing anything, I said. You are, her eyes shone. You were always so emotional. No, I said. I was always forgiving. You mistook that for weakness. She swallowed hard. You know Jason needs… Jason's an adult. This isn't about need, it's about theft. She looked down. Sign it, I said, or I go public. She signed. The notary returned. The documents were stamped, sealed, dated. The contested transfer revoked. The property officially frozen until a judge decided what came next. But we both knew there wouldn't be a ruling. Because with her signature, the house was no longer contested. It was quiet when we stepped outside. Wind brushed the parking lot, tugged at her sleeves. She turned to me. I didn't think you had this in you. I didn't either, I said, until you showed me who you really were. I walked away first, didn't look back. That night I unpacked the last box from the hall closet. Took out the baby blanket my grandmother made before she passed, pale green, soft from years of being folded just right. I sat in the nursery chair and laid it across my lap. I had no illusions left, not about family, not about blood. But I had my name on the deed again, and a child who would never wonder if she belonged. Because I'd fought for her before she was born, and no one would ever undo that, not even her grandmother. It was Sunday morning when I finished the letter. No lawyers, no threats. Just a white sheet of paper, my handwriting steady, each sentence carved from weeks of silence. Dear Mom, it began, this is not forgiveness, this is farewell. I didn't need to say more. I folded the page, slid it into an envelope, and left it unsealed. It wasn't meant to be mailed. It was meant to be written. In the weeks after the notary meeting, everything slowed. Caroline stopped posting. Jason didn't call. No one showed up with boxes or camera equipment. The silence was its own kind of victory. The judge closed the case without further hearing. Petitioner's documentation deemed exhaustive. The ruling read, residency and ownership reinforced by financial record and active use. I barely heard the rest. I had won, but it didn't feel like winning. It felt like reclaiming something I never should have had to defend. The house was quiet again. Not empty, not bare, just honest. The nursery smelled like lavender. The kitchen hummed with the old fridge I hadn't replaced yet. The floors creaked in the places they always had. Real things. Mine. I changed the locks one last time, this time not from fear, but finality. The garden out back bloomed late that year. The rosemary grew tall. The lavender spilled wide. I knelt beside it one afternoon and whispered thank you, like the soil had carried me through. My daughter was born on a rainy Tuesday, 6 pounds, red-faced, lungs like a storm. I named her Grace, not for elegance, but for what I had to build inside myself when everyone else took space away. After we came home, I walked her room every night, crib to window, window to door, my voice soft with lullabies, my footsteps steady. Sometimes I stopped and looked at the mural, the clouds, the moon, the paper stars, and thought of the night I nearly gave up. But I didn't, because motherhood wasn't something I inherited, it was something I defended. One morning, a letter arrived from a distant cousin. I heard what happened, I'm sorry. She didn't say more, she didn't need to. Truth echoes. Even when it's whispered, even when it's denied. I kept the letter in a drawer, not out of spite, but to remember, silence is never neutral, it's a choice. And I was done choosing silence. I didn't go to the next family wedding, I wasn't invited to the group reunion. No one offered me a ride to Grandma's headstone on her birthday, but for the first time in my life, I didn't feel left out. I felt free. In the end, revenge wasn't fire, it was the quiet line I drew, a line I never crossed again, and a house no one else would ever call theirs.